Dip netting is just using a big sturdy net, getting deep down into the mud and then searching through the mud looking for these benthic macroinvertebrates. So I've enlisted the help of Gerrit, our conservation lands technician.
Hi everyone.
It's not the tail and it's not through the shell. They actually have the ability to breathe through their butts. Hi everyone, my name's Ranger M and I work at Catfish Creek Conservation Authority. I'm the community outreach technician and that means I do a lot of this, chatting about all things nature and conservation with kids, adults, teachers, everyone. I love to knowledge share and that's just what I'm going to do with you. So come on, let's go learn with Ranger M. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Learn with Ranger M. You're in for a treat today. We're going to learn all about the mysteries of what really lies beneath the water's surface. So put your detective hats on and let's go explore the aquatic world. An aquatic habitat is the perfect place to learn about biodiversity, and that's because you have your land dwellers, or your terrestrial wildlife, and your water dwellers, or your aquatic wildlife. Now, what is biodiversity? Bio means living things. Diversity means a variety or a lot of different things. So in one ecosystem, we want to see lots of different things like turtles, snakes, plants, insects, muskrats. We don't just want to see muskrats and turtles in one habitat. Biodiversity is really important to have in an ecosystem because it creates resilience. Resilience means that the wildlife or the animals found in that ecosystem have adapted or built up some protection to changes that could happen in their ecosystem. If there's a threat to biodiversity, that means an ecosystem can become imbalanced or not be able to provide everything each animal needs. A threat could be either a loss of a species, an introduction of a species, or even just the destruction of an ecosystem. So today we're going to look at the biodiversity of this swamp behind me by looking at the plants and animals that are found here, and then we'll also discuss water quality and wetlands. Do you know how many species of turtles are native to Ontario? Do you know how many species of turtles are native to Ontario? There are 8 species of turtles found in Ontario. Unfortunately, all of them are on the species at risk list, so we have to do everything we can to help our turtles. As a conservation authority, we are always trying to ensure that we are implementing the best strategies and practices for our watershed to enhance the air and water quality within it. As I've mentioned before, flooding does happen in our watershed, and unfortunately that can have a negative impact on our water quality. The huge amounts of water that flooding brings can bring pollutants like fertilizer, road salts, pesticides, our litter, our waste. Another way our water quality is negatively impacted in the Catfish Creek watershed is through agriculture. Sometimes the riparian zone, or all of the vegetation that you see on the shoreline, is mowed down or removed. And then we farm right up to the edge of the creek, and that means there's no barrier to stop pollutants or runoff from getting into the water. Obviously, water quality and health is very important to our health and wildlife's health. So, conservation authorities do a lot with water quality monitoring. So today we're going to learn about monitoring, and we do this through biomonitoring, and that's by using what's called benthic macroinvertebrates to monitor the water quality. Now, what is a benthic macroinvertebrate? That's a pretty big word. Let's break it down. Benthic means bottom dweller. Macro means it's small, but we can see it with our naked eye. An invertebrate means they don't have a backbone. So really, it's a fancy word for aquatic bug. These benthic macroinvertebrates can be found underneath rocks or really digging down deep into the mud. So why are these little bugs so important to tell us all about water quality? Well, there's several different reasons. One, they're really down into the mud, and that's actually where a lot of the contaminants go. Two, they can really tell us a lot about local water issues, and that's because they don't have a lot of mobility. They don't move around a lot. Another reason is that they react very easily to different environmental stresses. And then also, different macroinvertebrates mean different things. So some of them can tolerate pollution, whereas some can't. And then they're also pretty easy to identify, and I'll show you that today. We're going to test the quality of the water here at Springwater Swamp. To do that, we're going to dip net. Dip netting is just using a big sturdy net, getting deep down into the mud and then searching through the mud looking for these benthic macroinvertebrates. I need help with this, so I'm going to go enlist a friend and I'll be right back. So I've enlisted the help of Gerrit, our conservation lands technician.
Hi everyone.
We're going to use our dip nets to scoop through the mud and look for benthic macroinvertebrates. Gerrit and I just wrapped up dip netting, so let's see what we found. I'm just using an ice cube tray today to separate the species we caught. White is a really good color to use because it makes it easier to see the species and helps us ID them. We're going to start with this guy. He's playing dead right now, but this one is a dragonfly nymph or dragonfly larva. Basically is what it means. It's in its baby stage. Most insects do have larvae that are in an aquatic stage for their larva or nymph stage. So believe it or not, this thing will become a dragonfly. Its tail has kind of a leaf-like tail, and that's actually where its gills are, so that's where it breathes. It is a predator. It will eat other invertebrates, and a dragonfly nymph represents a moderate quality body of water because it can handle some levels of organic pollution. So these are crayfish, also known as crawdads or crawfish, anything. Some people call them mini lobsters. They are related to lobsters, but they are not lobsters. These guys are freshwater. They will eat just about everything. Animals, plants, living, dead, all of the matter at the bottom of a river or a creek. They have gills as well, and they have a very strong exoskeleton. That's kind of why people think they look like lobsters, because they have a similar body and shell. Crayfish do molt, so that's when they lose the outer shell and get a new one that hardens over time. So if you find a crayfish that's super soft right around here, that means it's freshly molted, so its exoskeleton hasn't hardened up yet. So we have two very different sizes here, and we have found much bigger crayfish in spring water. They can get quite large actually, and quite surprisingly. They are edible. A lot of people, especially down south, it's a very common thing to eat, especially for protein. Crayfish can't really live in water that has a high amount of pollution, so crayfish are a really good representation of good quality water. Crayfish are very fun to search for as a child. I grew up doing it when I was camping. All you need is a net, and you very commonly find them underneath rocks. So during the day they're not very active, so they hide under their rocks, and then all you need to do is hold up your rock, scoop with your net, and you're most likely to find a crayfish. But always remember to, one, put the crayfish back in the water once you're done looking at them, and then two, put the rock back where you found it. You don't know what's under there and what's calling it a home, so always put your rock, flip it back over, and flip it where you found it. While they weren't our aim to find today, minnows are very common to find while we are searching for benthic macroinvertebrates. We have two different types of minnows here. We have the mud minnow, which is normally bigger and it actually has a rounded tail. And then we have the three-spine stickleback. So that's a three-spine stickleback, another very common minnow. It's very good to find minnows in an ecosystem as they're very important prey for fish species and then also birds. Another very common find when we're looking for macroinvertebrates is this little guy that's called a scud. It's a very shrimp-like creature, but it doesn't have a tail like a shrimp does. They do move similarly, they just squeeze their body together to move. They grasp their prey with their front legs that actually have claws. They're very common to find in and around rocks and near the bottom of a body of water. This is a diving beetle, also commonly known as a water beetle. They're very common predators found in a body of water. They're known to eat other invertebrates and actually sometimes small tadpoles. They have a bubble of air in their abdomen that helps them breathe and keep water out of their breathing parts. Now that we've looked through our creatures we found today, we have to remember to always put them back in their home. We've learned about benthic macroinvertebrates, tiny little insects that tell us about the quality of water. But there's actually other animals that we can see around ponds and swamps that tell us just as much about water as the insects, and that's frogs and toads. They're very common to see in Ontario, and there's a wide range of reasons why they're such great indicators. One is their life history. Both frogs and toads depend on an aquatic ecosystem for their breeding, their hibernation, and their tadpole life stages. Most frogs and toads spend a considerable amount of time on land and in water. Therefore, any changes to those ecosystems can affect them. Another reason frogs and toads are such good indicators is because they have permeable skin. They actually drink water by absorbing it through their skin, but this makes them more susceptible to toxic chemicals and microorganisms that they can also absorb through their skin. Another reason frogs and toads are such great indicators is because they are UV sensitive. So their eggs actually float on top of the water and they can't move on their own. So when the ozone layer is thinning, they are more at risk for lethal radiation and UV rays. So those are the main reasons why frogs and toads make such great indicators. But there are threats to our frogs and toads as well. One of the main ones is being habitat destruction or modification. Another one is road mortality. And not just frogs and toads are at risk for road mortality, there's also reptiles and mammals and birds, so always be careful when you're driving. Do you know how frogs breathe? Do you know how frogs breathe? As tadpoles, they breathe through their gills, but as adults, they develop lungs and they also breathe through their skin. So now that we've discussed how conservation authorities monitor water quality, we should also discuss what me and you can do on a regular basis to help water quality. One way is through protecting our wetlands. As I mentioned before, in the Carolinian Life Zone, wetlands are very common, or at least they were. There is only about 5% of the original wetlands remaining in Ontario. So we need to do our best to restore and protect our wetlands. Wetlands are areas of land that are normally transitional areas between wet and dry land, and they're also either permanently or seasonally flooded with shallow water. Also unique in wetlands is vegetation and soil that are adapted to very wet conditions. Wetlands are very productive and diverse ecosystems. You find a range of animals from amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and insects all in wetlands. In Ontario, we have 4 different types of wetlands. The most common in this part of Ontario are swamps and marshes, and then as you get farther up north, especially near Algonquin, you can see the bogs and fens that are more peatland and acidic wetlands. There is a 5th type of wetland, and it's called ephemeral wetlands, and they're basically oversized ponds that aren't present year-round. Normally, later in the summer, they dry up. These are very common. If you ever drive by a farmer's field in early spring and summer and you see this giant wet puddle in a farmer's field, that's an ephemeral wetland. They are not as diverse as a swamp or a marsh, but they are extremely important to migratory birds for resting grounds. That's why you see a lot of Canadian geese, or in about March, you see a lot of trumpeter and tundra swans. Wetlands have such far-reaching benefits that they're very important to both our health and our economy. A couple different benefits of wetlands include their ability to provide habitat for animals. They provide space, food, and access to water for a range of different animals, from terrestrial to aquatic. Wetlands also act as carbon sinks, and that means that the vegetation and the soil found within the wetland can hold and capture a lot of carbon from our atmosphere. Right now, there's a lot of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and it's called a greenhouse gas. And that's because it's creating this greenhouse effect on the Earth. So by capturing this carbon from the atmosphere, wetlands are helping us moderate the effects of climate change. As I've mentioned before, wetlands also help with flooding. They act as giant sponges. So when in the springtime we get a lot of water going through, the wetlands can hold a lot of that water. And they keep holding that water until we need it in the drought season. This way, wetlands help mitigate the costs associated with creating flood infrastructure and controlling and preventing floods. Another benefit of wetlands that we can enjoy is recreational opportunities. When you visit a wetland, you can go fishing, you can go hiking, you can go biking, you can go bird watching, You could go canoeing or kayaking or paddleboarding. There's so many options to enjoy while you visit a wetland. One of the most important benefits of a wetland is that the wetland is able to provide us and wildlife with clean and safe water. The vegetation found in a wetland is really good at filtering out pollutants, whether it's runoff from a farm, maybe some road salt or fertilizer or even pesticides. Therefore, by restoring and protecting wetlands, we are keeping Ontario's water clean and safe. Fun fact, did you know snakes are actually hypoallergenic? Fun fact, did you know snakes are actually hypoallergenic? You cannot be allergic to snakes. It's a common misconception that snakes are slimy and dirty, but they're actually incredibly clean as they do not have sweat glands or oily skin. Turtles, on the other hand, dirty reptiles. Let's talk about what we can find in wetland. We're going to start with turtles. And I have a poster here to show us all the turtles we can find in Ontario. Turtles are reptiles, and they're also ectothermic, or also known as cold-blooded. That means that they take on the temperature of the environment around them. So if you were to put a turtle inside of a fridge, it would be the same temperature as inside of the fridge. If you put a turtle on a hot rock that's been baking in the sun, the turtle is going to be the same temperature as that hot rock. So that's why you see a lot of turtles basking in the sun. They're just trying to warm up their bodies. The painted turtle, the one we find in Ontario, is called the Midland painted. This is probably one of the most common turtles in Ontario. It has a very pretty shell. You can see the red and the yellow on the head. The second most common turtle in Ontario is the snapping turtle, also one of the largest in Ontario. Now the snapping turtle obviously gets its name from its ability to snap. The snapping turtle snaps only when it's outside of water because that is its only defense mechanism. So you can see here, this is a diagram showing the belly of the snapping turtle. Now normally the shell of a turtle does go over its back and then covers its entire belly with a turtle's ability to bring its legs into its shell. The snapping turtle, unfortunately, doesn't have this ability. And as you see in this diagram, its carapace, or its belly part of the shell, isn't very large. It doesn't cover all of its fatty little belly parts. So a predator knows when he sees a snapping turtle on land to flip it over on its back to have access to those parts of the snapping turtle to eat. A snapping turtle has the ability to bring its neck all the way back, almost halfway on the back of its shell. This would allow the snapping turtle to flip back over and snap at its predators. Now, a lot of people are scared of snapping turtles because of their ability to snap, but humans actually have a stronger force in their molars than a snapping turtle has in its snap. Snapping turtles do have a little beak on its nose, and that's why sometimes they can draw blood, but they can never break a bone. And snapping turtles won't bite you underwater because they're actually faster swimmers, so they'll just swim away from you. There are 6 more turtles we find in Ontario. This is the spiny softshell. Kind of looks like a giant pancake in the water. This is a female, and then this is the male. For turtles, the females are always particularly bigger. Spiny softshells normally hide out on the sandy bottom of creeks with just their nose sticking out so they can breathe. This is a northern map turtle. This is a Blandings turtle. The Blandings turtle, the spotted turtle, and then the stinkpot turtle are also known as the musk turtle, and then the wood turtle are very uncommon to see. They're very at risk, so it's not very common to see them in the wild. The wood turtle is a very attractive turtle. It has this bright orange neck and legs. It was almost poached to extinction. Poached in the sense that it was taken out of its natural environment to go towards the pet trade, so people could have the wood turtle as a pet. This is the northern map turtle, not commonly spotted, but you can spot it around here. So those are all 8 of our turtles found in Ontario. As I mentioned before, all 8 of our turtles are on the species at risk list. That means if we don't do something soon for our turtles, they could all become extinct. Every summer, turtles have to lay their eggs, and they can't do it in the water. So all of the females have to get out of the water to go lay their eggs. Turtles can travel up to 8 kilometers to find the spot they want to lay their eggs in. In this part of southwestern Ontario, there are so many roads you can barely go a kilometer without hitting a road. So if a turtle was to travel 8 kilometers to find its perfect laying spot, that means she would have to cross 8 roads. One of the biggest threats to turtles right now is road mortality, or being hit by a car. One of the easiest ways we can help turtles is help them cross the road. The first thing you want to do before you move the turtle is check which direction it's moving in. Sometimes people always assume the turtle is heading towards the water, but it could be a female and it could be heading away from the water to go lay its eggs. Therefore, check which direction it's going and then help it go in that direction. If you come across a snapping turtle trying to cross the road but don't feel comfortable picking it up, that's okay. Try and find a stick or something long and sturdy like your snow brush in your car to get the snapping turtle to bite on. Then all you have to do is just drag the snapping turtle across the road. What you don't want to do if it's a snapping turtle, or any turtle for that matter, is to grab it by its tail. The tail is a continuation of its spine, and it would hurt to grab the turtle by the tail. Another way you can help our turtles out is by reporting if you ever spot a turtle laying eggs. Either report it to your local conservation authority or the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Both of these organizations can help collect the eggs or ensure the eggs are safe from predators. So that's how you can help out our turtles. Now before I wrap up turtles, I have a fun fact for you. I don't know if you've ever thought of what a turtle does in the winter, but I'm going to let you know. Now turtles do hibernate. No matter where they are in the summertime, they make their way to the wetland, and just before the water freezes over, they swim on down to the bottom of the wetland. They want to blend in with the mud and the vegetation that's found at the bottom of the wetland because they don't want their predators to find them. So they actually bury their heads and their bodies into the mud, so just the shell and their tail are showing. But like you and me, turtles have lungs, so they have to breathe oxygen. But if their head is buried in the mud, how are they breathing? Well, I'll give you a tip. It's not the tail and it's not through the shell. They actually have the ability to breathe through their butts. Since the turtles are sleeping while they hibernate, they're not eating anything, and therefore they don't have to excrete anything either. So they can actually take in gases through their butt and use enzymes and sciencey things to convert that into usable oxygen to stay alive throughout their winter. Have you ever wondered how scientists and field technicians test our water quality, or how they make sure our water is safe to drink? Well, one way conservation authorities and other environmental organizations is by studying benthic macroinvertebrates, and they tell us how our water is doing. For this activity, you will need rubber boots and clothes you won't mind getting a little dirty. Grab a net and a bucket and let's get exploring a local marsh, swamp, or pond. But always make sure you have permission to participate in this activity if you're going on someone else's property. You want to make sure you scoop down deep into the mud to stir up the bottom of the pond, as that's where all our benthic macroinvertebrates are going to be, because that's the benthic layer. Once you bring a scoop out of the water, you want to search through it very carefully, making sure you're watching for anything moving. Try and find all the benthic macroinvertebrates on this chart. See you in nature!